No problem, Dara. Good set of amendments there. Yeah, okay, well, just to briefly recapitulate and then add a few points from what was said yesterday and a few points on behalf of Deputy Smith, who couldn't make it along. The idea of a parents' and children's schools charter is not a bad idea in principle. It's a very good idea in principle to have proper grievance procedures, to have transparency about the expenditure of school funds, the expenditure of voluntary contributions, even though frankly they shouldn't exist, and I'll come on to that point in a second, and for the people to have information and real engagement with parents and school community about that charter. These are all reasonable things in and of themselves. However, the problem is that a lot of the focus, to my mind, of this bill, which then gives the minister the right to sort of essentially instruct school boards and schools to do certain things, is that the focus seems to be all internal rather than putting a charter of rights for education, for children and pupils in education, and indeed for their parents, which put real obligations on the government, on the department, on the minister to deliver a quality education. Many of the things that this bill seeks to do are in fact things that there are already mechanisms to deal with: the Teaching Council, boards of management, parent-teacher organisations, associations, and so on. So I would like to see, as I said yesterday, a charter that puts that essentially guarantees high-quality education and the resources necessary to deliver it for all children. That's not what this bill is about, and the fear, therefore, is that it ends up as being a sort of league table with schools competing for each other, and the kind of neoliberal model that you've seen in the UK. So that's a concern, notwithstanding the fact that some of the things that the bill says it's trying to achieve are not in itself problematic, but where it could lead, the logic it could lead. And the charter that I'd like to see is the one that says you have a right to be in a proper sized class, not oversized classrooms, that you have the right to proper school buildings and amenities and services, that you have the right to an SNA when you need one, that you have the right to free school meals, you have the right to free school books, that you have the right to free public transport, that you have the right, if you're a staff member, to ongoing professional development, to deal with things like difficult emotional behaviours, special needs issues, and so on. So that is the sort of charter I think we have to have, and indeed, as I mentioned yesterday, and quite a few others did, the right not to have to fundraise to provide basic services, equipment, or whatever in classrooms, and a demand that I think really emerged very clearly from the pandemic, the right not to do stressful, archaic exams like the Leaving Cert, which put immense stress on pupils, on teachers, and which really, I think, are anachronistic at a time when we should be trying to make sure that everybody has a right to move on to higher and further education, rather than essentially a gatekeeping exercise, which is what the Leaving Cert is, and a one-size-fits-all exercise, which the Leaving Cert is, which doesn't really actually deal holistically with the individual abilities and differences that exist between people in education. So all of those things, I think, are the sort of things we actually should have in a charter, rather than an over-focus on the, if you like, internal regime of schools. But a particular point, and I just want to get on to this because I made most of those points yesterday, is one of the really fairly scandalous things, and I don't know the picture all over the country, but like a basic ability for a school community to deliver a quality education for our children, indeed to involve the parents and so on, is to have the basic building, right? A quality building, or to have a building at all. And it is an amazing thing that we have this system where we recognise that there is a need for a school based in a particular area, based on census information or demographic information. We have a system then for the local community to decide which type of school they will have in their area, whether it will be a Gael school, or whether it will be Educate Together, or another type of patronage for a particular school. But we do not actually plan to provide the location and deliver the building for that school once it is established. And there are so many examples of this in my area, and if this is replicated elsewhere, and certainly it seems to be replicated with a number of examples that Deputy Smith has asked me to mention in Dublin South Central, but if this reflects the picture across the country, and I suspect it does, and I've heard a lot of other deputies talk about similar issues in their areas, and the amount of schools that are in prefabs, in temporary buildings, and so on, or lack recreation and sports halls, lack canteens, lack proper sports facilities, lack playing fields, and the things they need. It's really, we need a charter that actually guarantees those things to all schools, and to all school children, and to the parents who are fighting for the best quality education for their children. So just to mention a few examples, Booterstown, St Mary's Booterstown National School in my area, there's a recognised need for an ASD unit in that area. They have identified a parish hall right next door to the school where the church who owns the parish are willing to sell the parish hall to the school. The application has gone into the department, and they still have got no decision from the department. So a recognised need, they have the physical building, and they can't get an answer from the Department of Education for the use of this parish hall for children with special needs and for other uses for the school. Dún Laoghaire Educate Together, recognised as a school, finally, after a big fight, a hard campaign, and a lot of pressure on local politicians, eventually get a permanent location for the school, but it's going to be another couple of years. So long fight, and then another couple of years before they actually get the school. Gael School Line, in a temporary site, has to fight and fight and fight to find out which temporary site they're going to be in this year, to fight and fight and fight to get a permanent site. They finally got a permanent site, although interestingly it's going to come at the expense of traveller accommodation and social housing, a conflict that shouldn't happen, but obviously it meets their needs, but they have no idea when they'll actually get the physical school. Sallynoggin Educate Together now have been given a temporary location. Up until a couple of weeks ago didn't even have a temporary location, but now have been given a temporary location in an area that is outside their catchment area, that is not in the Sallynoggin area, but is in Dún Laoghaire, in a building where there's no play area whatsoever for the students, and where there's no certainty that they will have no permanent location for them at all, has been identified. The Red Door School, a special school in temporary accommodation for more than a decade. The Gael School Fóric in Ballybrack for I don't know how many years it is now, I think about 12 or 13 years, waiting for a permanent location. So there's just a sample of the lack of planning and lack of provision of basic things like a physical location, like a building, like the special needs provision that is necessary to actually give the quality education we need. Deputy Smith in her area has asked me to mention Ballyfermot, where there's been an amalgamation between St John's College, Dominican College and Caritas, and they have got a new location at St John's campus, but where for 1,000 secondary school boys and girls there will be no gym and no canteen in an area where there's considerable disadvantage and obesity and so on. The Golden Bridge National School in Inchicore, very old and dilapidated building in one of the poorest areas of Dublin. Fantastic school in terms of the teachers and the principal, but serious neglect in terms of the infrastructure that should be provided for the school. There's also in Dublin 10 and Dublin 12 a desperate demand for a Gael school, but in a very, very densely populated area of the country and the community are crying out for a Gael school, but for some mysterious reason the department will not grant the right for a Gael school in the area. So charters inside a school, all very well, but unless we deliver the resources, the buildings, the facilities, the supports, then charters mean very little.